20 million people in the United States right now cannot pay their electricity. Food, shelter, and your energy, those things are the priorities, right? And those aren't getting paid. So this is right now, literally right now, at the end of August 2022, we are in a critical zone.
1 ounce silver 2022 Noah's Ark coins at $4.25 over spot. Quarter ounce silver 2022 Noah's Ark coins $3.25 each over melt. Call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. 1-888-815-4237.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty in Finance. And back with us today is our good friend David Quintieri from the Money GPS and the very popular Money GPS YouTube channel. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me again. As always, it's a pleasure.
What I did want to discuss today is inflation, money velocity, what the Fed is doing. First, if we could discuss money velocity, because you recently have been saying that money velocity is just taking off right now, and that could have a major impact on inflation going forward. Can you explain for our viewers what money velocity is and what's happening to it right now and how it can impact inflation?
Absolutely. So for years and years, we had seen money velocity declining. And why is this the case? It's because they're pumping so much of this fake electronic fiat garbage cash into the system, but it's not getting spent into the system. It's not getting loaned out. It's not getting spent up. It's just sitting there on bank balance sheets and, buying treasuries and all this nonsense instead of actually being used for productive means. And so the actual velocity of that money has been declining. It's not exchanging hands. It needs to exchange hands. It's called currency for a reason, because it has to actually flow, but it hasn't been doing that. And so over the years, that's been declining. However, now we have seen quite a different situation. Now, if you look at it in real terms, it's still very low, but the year-over-year growth has been quite significant. And we saw this kind of same pattern happen the last time the Federal Reserve increased interest rates and did their whole quantitative tightening and everything, let's say, technically starting from 2015 into 2018 and 19. And that was devastating on many levels. And of course, they reversed course in September 17th, 2019, when they started their not QE plans. But essentially right now, with that money velocity, we watch it. We watch it as a good indicator to show us what could happen. Because imagine where inflation is today. And now imagine if the monetary velocity was picking up. I mean, it would just be so shocking to see it. But nobody really knows what will happen, of course. But as we see the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates, this could, in fact, create more of this velocity. So I'm interested to see. It all depends on how high the interest rates goes. It's really dynamic, but it is one that I'm keeping a close eye on.
Now, does this have to do with also fractional reserve lending? Because I know if the Federal Reserve, creates some money, if it flows into the economy, it can essentially, my understanding is that it can expand about tenfold, because one bank can lend it to the next, and that bank can lend it to the next, and so on. So you have the money in circulation actually being about 10 times what the Fed might put out there. Is that related to money velocity at all?
Yeah, I mean, the way you got to look at it, and you're absolutely correct, is that if the bank is loaning it out and it's loaning it out at 10 times what the reserves are, and this basically keeps the banking system going, and you would think that it would keep the economy going, but that's not really happening today. If you look at the reverse repos, imagine a bank. They could loan money to you and I, they could loan money to a business, but instead, these banks are parking their cash overnight at the Federal Reserve and earning a small interest rate. Now, that is not productive at all. This is not a great use of cash, and yet it's over $2 trillion a night that is going and just circulating around within itself. It is a total bunch of nonsense, but that just shows you that instead of actually utilizing the $2 trillion to productive means, instead it's going to this reverse repo nonsense. And, that's kind of the thing. So if it was actually being loaned out, you could make the argument, okay, it's making the economy grow, loans are happening, growth is there. Maybe it's a little bit of that fractional reserve fictionality to it, but it's just not happening. It's just unbelievable.
For the longest time since 2008, when the Fed had originally made that unprecedented increase in its balance sheet, we weren't seeing a lot of inflation until just very recently. Is the reason for that is money just wasn't flowing, as you were mentioning, that money velocity wasn't high?
That is definitely part of it. I mean, and there's also a lag time in between when they start printing and the time in which you see those inflationary pressures come through. At the same time, yes, we do have supply chain issues. We do have all these other things. But certainly we must not ignore what's been happening with the central banks. If you expand the total amount of currency supply, you're going to devalue the currency. We know this now. Some people are still trying to figure that out, but it looks like, once again, we know the drill here, okay? We've been studying this for a long time, and you just see the same patterns repeated over and over again. Print the money, you debase the currency, prices go up.
In mentioning inflation and what the Fed might do in the future, you had the Federal Reserve in your background there. So tell us what your thoughts are on Fed policy right now and what might happen in the near future.
Absolutely. I'm here live in front of the Federal Reserve to give everybody the latest details. So basically, you've got Jackson Hole happening right now. It's a big meeting where you've got a bunch of different central bankers. They gather together and they talk about what they believe needs to happen. No policy is necessarily decided at this event. But right here, we have a situation in which all central banks, for the most part, around the world are increasing interest rates. It's a tightening policy. We've already seen over $1 trillion go away from the global central bank balance sheets. So we know that that's already the case. There's been countless interest rate hikes when you look at it on a global scale. Right now, with the Federal Reserve specifically, we watch as they've been increasing. The rhetoric has been exactly the same. We need to tame inflation. We do not want to make the mistake of the 1970s where they increase but not enough, and then they start to decrease, and then they start to increase dramatically again. They want to make sure that inflation is tamed before they actually reduce interest rates. So what does that mean? Well, look at what's happening with inflation. If you look at the fake, and we talk about fake inflation here, the fake inflation, the numbers that they give us, when you look at that, yes, it may diminish. It may come down somewhat. And by the end of the year, if the pace at which it's declining comes down, we would still be elevated, okay? We would still be at, let's say, 5%, maybe 6% on their metrics, whereas we were at 9% just recently. So even if it would steadily come down, we're still in that range of 5 to 6%. That's way off the target of 2% inflation. Okay, so they want to bring it down to 2% inflation. How do they do that? They have to have interest rates that are elevated to a point to actually facilitate 2%. And you can't do that by having the Fed funds rate at 0 or at 1% or anything like this. It has to be higher than the rate of inflation. And so what they're doing here is they're playing this little bit of cat and mouse. They're trying to use their forward guidance. They've got central bankers practically every day. I'm seeing quotes from them telling the public, telling the news media and so on, that we are determined to bring down inflation. And yet the markets over the last month and a half or what have you, they've basically been saying, yeah, right, the Federal Reserve is not going to do that. No worries. Just buy GameStop, just buy AMC, just buy Bed Bath & Beyond garbage, just buy all of this nonsense because the Federal Reserve is here to do exactly what they did in 2020. And yet we have seen none of that, absolutely none of that right now. And yet the mentality behind the typical speculator is exactly what it was in early 2020 or early to mid 2020. So this is complete nonsense. And I'm just excited to see what happens here because the Federal Reserve seems to be holding strong, at least in their words, in what they're going to do.
It does seem like they're holding strong. It seems like their main priority is to get inflation under control. However, we are seeing inflation decrease a bit. We are seeing, at least by the official numbers, a strong labor market. And that's one of the Fed's priorities, right, is to have a strong labor market and also control inflation. So do you think the cooling inflation by the official numbers and the strong labor market will give the Fed any room to pivot or stop raising rates?
Realistically, I think the most likely scenario for the September FOMC meeting is that they'll increase by 50 basis points. That's a total guess. I'm just guessing here, but some of the members of the voting, like the voting members, are saying, well, we don't want to take it too high. We don't want to go overboard. So I think that's kind of hinting towards a 50 basis point rate increase. Now, they've done 275s in a row. They've increased prior to that. So I think that we're already much higher than where people thought we would be at this point. But it all depends on what happens in the coming months with the data. I still think we're going to be seeing, like, there's no rate cut. The chances of a rate cut in 2022 are almost zero, okay, as far as I'm concerned. Into 2023, the expectation here, at least the market is pricing in more rate hikes in 2023, and maybe not significant, but maybe it's a 25 basis point each time around, and so on, because they have to get it down to 2%. So we're gonna watch what happens. I'll be covering it, obviously, but it's just something that I don't think people understand, because they think to themselves, if they increase interest rates, then the markets are just going to take a beating, so they can't. But I don't think they realize, if you get inflation up to a certain level, which we're basically at right now, you will have people in the streets rioting and burning places down. Like, so they have to calm it down. They have to. That is very, very important. You don't need to have people that are, jobless, mass unemployment and whatever to create this problem. 20 million people in the United States right now cannot pay their electricity. What does that tell you? Is that is that half the people? Is that half the population? Is that, more than that? No, it's a significant portion. And that's electricity bills. You're going to pay your electricity bill if you can. You're going to pay your food bills if you can. Maybe you don't need to pay the Netflix. Maybe you don't need to pay all that nonsense. But your food, shelter, and your energy, those things are the priorities, okay? And those aren't getting paid. So this is right now, literally right now, at the end of August 2022, we are in a critical zone.
It definitely seems like we are, and it seems like the Fed is obviously trapped, as so many people have been saying, is they can either crash the economy by raising rates, or they can pivot and let inflation take off, as it already is right now. We have been seeing supply shortages also making inflation worse. And you recently put out a video saying that there may come a time when the government actually has to restrict resources because things are getting so bad. So can you expand on why you think that is actually a possibility?
We've been seeing many governments basically saying that we do not have enough. This is particularly in Europe, but it's going all over the place. We don't have enough energy for the winter time. We're going to start restricting. I mean, I can't believe I'm even seeing this. We're not talking about developing nations here. We're talking about developed economies, and they're saying we have to ration what we have. I mean, you just have never heard of anything like this before. And it's not about, the price that people have to pay. It's not about, prices are elevated at this time. This is literally, they are rationing the amount that people are going to get. And it might be one company or another, or it might be the government that steps in and says this, but it's starting to happen. I did a video about it recently, and it was either Finland or Norway starting to warn about it. There's another place as well. But essentially, it's not good. It's not good, because it's not as if you're not going to be able to just fork out some extra cash, have a little bit of savings. We're talking about actually eliminating that. And we've seen governments around the world do this before. They've actually starved out the population. And so we hope to never have to see that again. But I've always told people, you got to be prepared on your own. You got to have your own situation in order, because you can't rely on the governments. You can't rely on institutions to provide anything for you. It won't be there. So best idea is to definitely get your food situation, water, energy, anything that you can do. See those things as investments.
When you talk about getting food, water, and energy kind of prepared ahead of time, what are some of your favorite strategies in that regard?
I really think it depends on where you live. For instance, if you live in an area that's just sunny all the time, you're in California, there's a drought, but it's sunny every single day, well, maybe solar panels really works for you. Maybe that's fantastic. I know people that have said, I do not pay an electricity bill. Like, that's fantastic. So the price went up, it just doesn't affect them at all. And some people sell back to the grid, which is cool as well. It depends on, again, your situation, your area where you live. With water, there's areas that are just stuck in a drought and they do not have any sort of water harvesting. If you're in that situation, you've got to do it. You've got to, and you can get. I mean, there's all kinds of resources out there, but essentially you catch that water in a type of barrel or huge container, and then that water becomes yours. I mean, there's areas that are kind of off grid that this is very normal for, whether it's in the deserts of Arizona or maybe you live in Hawaii, that are just kind of everyday kind of things. But for other places, it is possible. Food situation, grow a garden, no doubt about it. You can grow sprouts inside your own house. You can get an arrow garden, which is an indoor type of growing thing. Sure, it's small, but maybe it'll help a little bit. You can also have storable food, have things that last a long time: rice, beans, pasta. These are things that everybody should have. You don't have, in your house, you maybe got 2 packs of pasta. Why not have 20 packs? Why not be more prepared? Because you're going to have that stuff and you're just going to eat it anyway. You're just going to have these things. And I think people should get wise to all of this.
And I know I've talked to Bob Moriarty, who is very knowledgeable about preparedness. And he says that we need to have not just a plan B, but a plan C, D, E, and F. Your perspective on having multiple plans, because things obviously don't always turn out how we expect. I don't think anybody expected, the world to shut down 2 years ago. So, unprecedented things we don't expect can happen all the time.
100%. Yeah. I try to stress having a plan B because people don't even have a plan B. But I absolutely agree that there should be a C and D and E and F because things fail and things don't always work out the way we want. It's just a matter of fact. You think it's going to be this way and then suddenly it doesn't. You think you're going to be going out somewhere tomorrow and it ends up raining. And so we need to be prepared. We need to bring our umbrellas, our raincoats, whatever you want to look at it as. But there are different things that we can do. So for instance, where you live right now, it might be close proximity to where you work. So you need to kind of live there. But instead of buying, some other type of investment, maybe it would be a good, and you want to look at it like this, investment to have another property that's maybe a cottage that you go to on the weekends. Maybe you go there, visit a few times a year even. And that cottage, you might think, it's a waste of money, but maybe not, because maybe that's going to give you a place to go if there's some civil unrest, and you're going to have that place. And believe me, you're going to appreciate the money that you put into it. Now, are you going to see civil unrest? It's possible. It depends on the city you live in. It depends how close you are to the city center. These are all things that you need to really address for yourself. If you're already in an area that's sort of sprawled out, maybe not as big of a concern. But for some people, they're living in the high rise. They're living in a big, really condensed environment, and those are powder kegs. That's something that could really flip in an instant. So I would watch out with that. Just the simple matter of thinking of having a secondary property would really change a lot of people's lives, even just their lifestyle too, because, hey, now I got a property. Instead of investing in whatever Amazon stock or GameStop or whatever, maybe you buy that second property and you just enjoy it. It's like having jewelry. It's like having, high-end watch or something. Yeah, you get to enjoy that jewelry, but at the same time, it kind of appreciates in value because of the metallic value, because maybe it's a limited edition or what have you. And these things here, people, they don't think of them as investments all the time, but it's that sort of thinking outside the box, I think, would be beneficial.
I think thinking outside of the box is definitely beneficial in that regard. Also, reducing risk across the board, I think, is very important, because your perspective on this, but I think, I've been hearing that we might be going into a very inflationary period. We might be going to a deflationary period. We really don't know what the future holds. And I think probably getting out of debt and reducing risk is a very important thing to do at the moment. Your perspective on that, noting that obviously we can't give individualized financial advice.
Absolutely. Yeah. So right now, what I'm hearing from a lot of people, different wealthy people that I've talked to, different courses that I'm a part of, they've basically all been saying the same kind of thing. It's that during this period of time, it is very uncertain, and you should hold a position in cash that is probably higher than where you want to be. You don't want to have any form of debt at this time, even though you might think, hey, inflation's going to wipe out my debt. You don't know what's going to happen. You really don't know. So you want to get out of that, all that bad debt, and you want to try to increase your income at the same time. A few basic things that you can do. Start a side hustle. Try to get a performance-based output at your work. So, hey, boss, if I do this and this, will you end up giving me this? And you can do this in some cases, particularly if you're a contractor. And so, these are the kind of things that people should be doing right now, because you're going to want to deploy more cash at a later time in order to get those assets for a bit cheaper. It really all depends on your current circumstances. But I think right now you need to be wary of what's going on. Increasing interest rates generally results in asset prices falling. It is generally, again, we don't know. History indicates that first the stock market goes and then real estate falls after. That kind of has been happening now, but things are still very early. So we'll have to see how it goes. It all depends on how long the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates elevated and what they do. But I'm keeping a close eye on that, and you should too. Watch the balance sheet specifically, not the total number in the balance sheet, but the change in the balance sheet. So look at it on like a month-to-month basis, look at it on a year-over-year basis, and I think you'll be amazed at what you see.
Well, it definitely will be interesting to continue to track this, David, with you. We really appreciate your time today. Any last thoughts before we let you go? And where can our viewers find you online if they're interested in learning more?
Yes, you can join me at the Federal Reserve every day. But no, it's just, that's kind of where you got to keep your eyes focused right now. The Fed, what they're doing, every action that they take, every word that they say, because it's going to make a big difference in the markets and, of course, in the economy. And so one of those places, obviously, is the Money GPS YouTube channel, but you can see, so many different areas, whether it's like a CNBC, Bloomberg type of thing, or you can look at the Federal Reserve website, because any of their speeches, any of their statements are all going to be listed there. You got to keep an eye on also the other central banks around the world. When you look at the ECB, the Bank of Japan, PBOC, look at their actions. The only central bank right now that's really pushing in the exact opposite direction that the Fed and the rest of the world are is the People's Bank of China. Something odd is happening right now in that the Fed and all central banks are tightening, and China's going complete opposite. They're pumping stimulus like never before. So I think that disparity in between the two is unusual, and I would just say that brings a big question mark. So keep an eye on that as well. Again, the Money GPS, you can find me online.
I'd recommend all our viewers to go check out that YouTube channel, link in the description of this video. Thank you once again, David, for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.